politics. This is
I'm a huge Office fan, so I
so
love
great,
this conversation.
right?
It's such a great. Maybe she stalked Ryan long enough to have their kids.
I mean, I'm a huge Office fan. I didn't know they had a relationship outside of working. Stephen, good to see you, my friend. We're going to get to Georgia in just a second, but I'm a little freaked out about what happened in New York. For folks that don't know, candidates endorsed by President Trump won sweeping victories in last night's primary ahead of elections in November. Trump-backed candidates winning from Maryland to Utah. It was also a big night for New York City Mayor Zohan Mandami, as ABC's Phil Tite reports.
In New York's 7th Congressional District, where Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez's seat was up for grabs, Brooklyn BP Antonio Reynoso fell short to Claire Valdez, a Democratic socialist and union organizer who picked up the endorsement of Mayor Mamdani. Here in the 10th Congressional District, former City Comptroller Brad Lander unseated Representative Dan Goldman. Lander was also endorsed by the mayor, while Goldman was endorsed by Democrats, including Governor Hochul.
Now, New York City is going full-on Democratic socialist after Mondami's victory. Goldman was the sitting representative. He got smashed like 70-30. Is this just a New York City thing? Or is this the future of the Democratic Party, that we're going to have Democratic socialists being elected everywhere?
Yeah, look, this may be the canary in the coal mine for Democrats, right? This is clearly a growing wave. I think what you've seen with this is now the Democrats in Congress are going to double the number of socialists they have overnight because of the mayor of New York. I mean, this is really unprecedented what we're seeing in this rise in socialism in this country. You've seen it a little bit in Georgia. There are a couple Georgia House members, and it seems to be growing and picking up steam. And now I think they have a ringleader and a flag bearer in the mayor of New York City. It's a really scary time, I think, for our country to see the progressive left go to full bent on socialism. You know, one of the quotes from the mayor last night was, "A year ago, it was not the end of a political movement, it was the beginning." This is clearly something that he is trying to spread and create and grow, not just potentially in New York City, but I think the mayor of New York is clearly positioning himself as a national leader, not just of this movement, but potentially of the Democrat Party.
It's concerning for me in a number of reasons. First off, the absolute anti-Israeli sentiment from the three candidates that won yesterday, that freaks me out quite a bit. It also freaks me out. You know, I am a centrist, right? I'm scared by the extreme left and by the extreme right. I'm one of those middle 60 kind of guy. So anything to the extremes, it makes me nervous. The fact that they just whitewashed, quote, establishment Democrats. And I would imagine Republicans are like, yeah, screw the establishment. Be careful what you wish for. Like, do you want this to spread in the opposition party? I'm a little freaked out right now.
Yeah, especially, to your point, Mark, really this rise in anti-Semitism that we're seeing across the country. I don't think you can unlink these two things. There is this movement on the far left to really attack Israel and really undermine the Jewish people. And you're seeing that. And I think it's a dangerous time in our country. We cannot let that type of hate spread, whether it's, to your point, on the far right or the far left. We've got to call it out universally. And I think we've got to be very vigilant standing with the Jewish community against these sorts of attacks. And really, it's very concerning to see this rise and this spread of socialism on the far left.
And just to reiterate how big and shocking this is, the Mandami-backed candidates defeated candidates backed by both Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, right? The minority leaders in both the House and the Senate, they backed the other candidates and they got whitewashed.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I think Mayor Mamdani, he's going to clearly use this as a growing platform, and he's clearly accumulating a lot of power in New York. And I think the interesting thing, does that give him more power in the city of New York? And then what does it do for his political future, especially when he's right next up to AOC, right? And they're sort of running in this same lane. That's going to be a really interesting dynamic to watch.
I mean, before Mamdani, after Mamdani, like AOC seems moderate to me now, like
which is that's scary,
yeah, right? Especially what people have uncovered about Mondami's wife's and her social media posts in the like. I'm hoping this is just a New York City thing, and because I don't want extremes on either side. All right, let's bring it back down to Georgia, my friend. Special session recap. What do the listeners need to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were three big things that were on the docket heading into this special session that just concluded yesterday. The first was redistricting. This question about redistricting, are we going to redraw the maps? Essentially what House and Senate leadership said is, we're going to do this and we're going to look at this, but we're not going to rush it and we're not going to do it right now. The context of that is that there were many Republicans that feared that redrawing the lines now over summer ahead of a November election would energize and galvanize the Democrats, particularly African Americans, which are the core of the Democrat base. I think politically for Republicans, that was probably a
to gain Republican
Yeah.
seat during redistricting.
But again, with these margins that we have, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal. All right, go on to second point of the special session.
Yeah, property tax discussion. We had a number of bills. Obviously, you'll remember, Mark, in the regular session, this was a flashpoint as well. You had House Republicans really wanting and pushing for cutting and capping property taxes. They were able to get a measure passed that capped the assessments from rising, but it was not as much as they wanted. They came back this special session and pushed for it again, basically allowing local governments on a one-to-one swap for a 1% sales tax increase for a reduction in property taxes. But it was the vote was to put a referendum on the ballot to let voters decide if they wanted that. Democrats in the House blocked it universally 3 times. They considered it 3 times in the special session. I think that's really, really risky for Democrats in Georgia. We know that people are getting crushed right now by property taxes. You're seeing local governments either hold their millage rate the same or in some cases increasing as property values are rising. So there's a lot of people getting crushed by property taxes right now. I think it's a risky, risky bet for House Democrats to die on that hill. And we'll see if it costs them in November.
I understand the logic in this is like, all right, homeowners, giving them a break, does that unfairly impact the renters in society, et cetera? But as we were talking about Brookhaven, sorry to bring up a sore subject, like I used to live in Post Brookhaven, 40% property tax increase in Brookhaven. I am just going on the assumption that the owners of Post Brookhaven, if that's still what it's called, they are going to have to pay more in tax now, and that's going to increase rents.
They are. And the thinking behind the sales tax is, okay, if you have your home, right, you can choose on a consumption level, on a sales tax, what you want to buy, what you want to spend money on. You don't have any control as a homeowner what you're being taxed at. If your taxes on your home keep going up, you have no control over that. And so I think that was the thinking behind this sales tax for property tax swap. I think most voters, most homeowners would be totally fine with that, but they're not going to get a chance because Democrats in the House blocked it. So we'll see if that kind of reemerges in November.
What about paper ballots? What's the deal here?
Yeah, so the third thing was elections. There was the legislature passed a measure that would 2 years ago to remove the QR code from our election ballots. Obviously, when you go vote, you get a printout and there's a QR code on top, and that's how those votes are being counted. But there was no funding to be able to remove that. So they had to come back this special session and essentially kick the date out from doing that. But what they also considered this special session is creating a framework, a legislative committee to look at a new voting system entirely ahead of next year when we have a new Secretary of State and a new governor. There's obviously been a number of questions with our current voting system that we have in place that we've had since 2019. And the thinking was the legislature is going to form a new committee to look at a new voting system ahead of next year.
So theoretically, if everything goes according to plan, I could be misreading this, but when I go to vote in 2027, it's pen on paper, not the digital thing that I've been used to?
What the study committee is going to look at is a number of recommendations and possibilities ahead of that RFP for a new system. There's a number of routes they could go. There's a system called ballot on demand, which, again, you get a blank ballot. You put it into the machine, you input your choices, and it prints out your selections. That's one way to do it. There's obviously a contingent on the far right that wants nothing but hand-mark paper ballots. In theory, that sounds good. Logistically, it becomes a nightmare to count all of those
chads, like
millions of ballots. There is no other state in the country that does that on a statewide basis. And so I think what this committee will be doing is weighing all of those options, looking at some of the best solutions
like
out there.
Hybrid kind of
Potentially,
solution.
yeah. There's a lot of things they could do, maybe some in early voting on one system and then election day on another. But this committee made up of members of the legislature will be making those recommendations.
Dentons.com, and soon to have a GoFundMe to pay his property tax. It's Stephen Law. Do you have World Cup tickets for Saturday?
We went to the South Africa game. It was a phenomenal experience. All the fans, international folks, were great. Marta was easy. It was a great time.
But you don't have tickets for Saturday.
I don't.
Mike Shields said the cheapest to get in on Saturday, Deborah, $2,700 right now.
That's why we went and saw South Africa. Yeah.